Now, birthright citizenship is the simple idea that if you're born in the jurisdiction of the United States, you have a right to American citizenship.
You are automatically
You are automatically an American
Okay.
citizen.
Okay.
If you have a child in the United States, if you go to the hospital, they don't ask your nationality when you are about to give birth, and they don't question the nationality of the child that is being born.
Let's go.
Good afternoon, and welcome to AU Studios. I am your host, Dr. Miya Burt-Stewart, and it is an absolute pleasure to have you all join us again. We know that it's been a while. We've been kind of revamping and getting material and just revitalizing what we have here for you, our listening and viewing audience. And so we're excited to be back. And so today we have someone with us who is not a stranger. You have met this gentleman here in the studios before. He is an immigration lawyer, business and immigration lawyer, one of the best, if I may say so myself. And so in the past, Ralph Kenol has come and talked to us about immigration and some of the challenges and, just some of the, I guess, the pros and cons of immigration under, I think this was the Biden administration the last time we talked. And so we know that things have changed markedly within the last 3 days. And so Mr. Kenol is here again today to talk to us about immigration under the Trump administration. And so we don't want, for our listeners or our viewers, we don't want to make you nervous. It's not a political session. It's more informational. And so we'll share, Mr. Kenol will share with us kind of some of the things we can expect, really give us the definition on some of the things that are happening now. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Ralph Kenol. Ralph?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
And thank you. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to the community out here and share what's happening.
What's happening?
What I got to tell you is there's this phrase that's been in the media the last couple of days, and that phrase is shock and awe.
Wow.
And I got to say, if you were looking for that, this president did not disappoint.
Okay.
Do you want to start with some questions first? Or?
Well, so let's do this. We'll kind of just let you give an overview of the last 3 days. So, the administration, there was a change in administration, and so they were, signing of some bills. And when you say shock and awe, I think I was just sharing with you, I've been reading about, the refugee coverage and, TPS, immigration, so to say. So, I'll just kind of let you just jump in there.
The immigration process and the immigration structure has been something that has been rife with complications and complexity. It's been something that we've been trying to deal with for the last 30 years, trying to figure out what kind of immigration policy and programs should we have. And these are long, labored debates. No one really expected a change to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. There's always been a request for certain changes to happen, but things just kind of moved and trudged along. And I've been practicing in immigration this will be my 25th year.
Okay, wow,
and the only year that I can compare to what we're dealing with this year was September 11th, 2001. Because on September 11th, that shock, the moment of that attack, caused some really radical policies to be implemented immediately, and there were security concerns. But the idea at that time, and it was debated, but at least the stated presentation was, we've got a security concern, we've got to do something about it, and we've got to do something and take immediate measures. This time is a little bit different, because although there have been statements to that effect in the last year or so, there's been a lot of sensationalist things, criminal actions of a gang that came from Venezuela, and they were in the media for a while. There was the horrible assault and murder of a woman by the name of Laken Riley. And these sensationalist stories did create a fervor in the community. But there was also a sense this year of a grievance.
Okay.
And there were many people across the political spectrum, which has to be acknowledged, that sort of felt that the system was being gamed. Because what we saw for the last couple of years were lines of people at the southern border that seemed to be coming in with no rhyme or reason. And oftentimes, the story would be juxtaposed with a person who applied for their visa, their student visa, or a person who applied for their relative and had been waiting in the line for years and years. And you'd see stories on the news of people saying, hey, I've been waiting for my visa for 5 years, 10 years. Or, hey, I'm an engineer and I want to get this visa, but there's only a few available. But then there are people that are just coming across the border. Well, this president did something that many of us in the practice in the immigration world knew would come, but we didn't really believe it. He began his administration with some of the most radical changes to immigration policy that this country has seen since the establishment of immigration in this country.
Wow.
And one of the first things that he decided to do was challenge something that, shocking is the right word, that is fundamental to the concept, to the identity of the United States of America. He said that he wanted to end something called birthright citizenship. Now, birthright citizenship is the simple idea that if you're born in the jurisdiction of the United States, you have a right to American citizenship.
You are automatically an
You are
American
automatically an
citizen?
American
Okay.
citizen.
Okay.
If you have a child in the United States, if you go to the hospital, they don't ask your nationality when you are about to give birth, and they don't question the nationality of the child that is being born, except for one occasion, and that is for diplomats.
Okay.
Because diplomats are not under the jurisdiction of the United States. There's something called diplomatic immunity. If you go into a foreign embassy, you are on foreign soil. You are subject to the laws of that country.
Even here in the United States, if you were to go into a diplomatic office, that is considered on foreign soil. So if I go to Brickell into the Moroccan, diplomatic office, I would be considered to be on foreign soil,
That's
even
correct.
though it's here in Brickell.
That is correct.
Got it.
And
Wow.
once you enter the confines, the confined area, you could be found to break the laws of that country. So if, for example, a country had a prohibition against alcohol, and you, in protest of that prohibition, decided to bring alcohol onto that property, you'd be breaking the laws of that country.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why this is important is because the 14th Amendment of the United States had some language, and I want to read this language.
Okay, sure.
Language says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Now, that language came into the 14th Amendment because just after the Civil War, the defeated Confederates did not want to give rights to African Americans. So the government felt it not robbery to make sure that it was encoded in the language of the United States of America that anyone born in the United States is a citizen. Anyone subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is a citizen. So that distinction of being subject to the jurisdiction is what's important. So when the president issued his executive order saying that he wants to end birthright citizenship, one of the things that's in that executive order is the idea that certain people aren't subject to the jurisdiction. They're not subject to the law. And in that executive order, they gave examples, people who have tourist visas and people who are undocumented. Now, there were people that were prepared for this, and there's already litigation that has been filed in many parts of the United States.
Yes.
And one of the things that they said is, well, wait a minute. If I show up in the United States and I'm undocumented and I break the law, I can get arrested. I'm subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. whether I'm documented or not, the only group of people that's actually not subject are the diplomats. So
Okay.
holding on to the actual wording of this amendment is going to be very, very helpful. But once again, to talk about this idea of shock and awe, since it's so fundamental to the United States, the idea that we're not a country that's based on race or religion. We're a country that's based on an idea. And that idea is that people come here for a better life,
Yes.
and they come here in support of the tenets of our Constitution. And doing that is what makes you an American, right? And being born here gives you the opportunity for that. And changing it is fundamental to who we are. So that shock has really shaken up the practice of immigration, and it's shaken up the community.
Yeah.
But what I have come to understand is that it's kind of like a subterfuge, because there are so many other things that are happening that are more likely to actually take place while we're focused on this
Birthing rights.
statement,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's going to go through the courts. So nothing is going to happen immediately. It's going to make it to the Supreme Court. And the legal community is basically of one mind that this is the law of the land. So I'm not as concerned about this being overturned as I am about the completion of the wall,
Okay.
as I am about the surging of troops to the border, as I am about raids, as I am about the Alien Sedition Act. Now, these other things are designed to do something else. And what they're designed to do is to really and truly intimidate part of our community. Because when you now know that the wall is going to come up and there's going to be nothing to stop it, because while there is a focus on this litigation, the president declared a national emergency. And one of the things that happens when you declare a national emergency is that funds are made available and certain processes and procedures that would be required under normal circumstances are no longer going to be there.
Yeah.
So that whole discussion that we had a couple of years ago about building a wall is off the table.
Okay.
The Alien Sedition Act is basically an authorization for the use of military force. And the idea of the Alien Sedition Act is that there are these aliens, like there were 80 years ago, like there were German spies and Japanese spies, allegedly, and under that, the American government could go and round up people that they believe to be a threat to the United States. Now, what the president is saying is that he wants to use that to go after these so-called dangerous international gangs, like a gang called Tren de Agua and another gang called MS-13, just as examples. And he wants to use that show of force to round these folks up because they present a clear and immediate threat to the United States. But what's going to happen on the other side is we may see in certain communities armed force and the presence of armed individuals, raiding people, where in the past they were treated criminally and law enforcement would arrest a gang member. That gang member would be identified as not having the proper immigration documentation and they'd be placed in immigration proceedings. Now what we might have is a situation where an area that is known to have the presence of certain gang members be raided by heavily armed ICE agents. And now you're talking about a situation where you have teens that could be associated with the wrong crowd that get rounded up in an ICE raid. One of the other things that happened over these last few years was the Biden refugee and parole programs.
Yes.
Now, there's been a lot of political instability in Latin America and in many parts of the world. So what the president did was he said, look, we can't do major immigration reform. There are people that have been waiting in the queue for many, many years. So I'm going to try to put together a process that will help some people out, particularly the neediest. So if you had a relative or someone that you could sponsor, you could help have them seek parole. But that parole process is very, very different from the traditional parole process before it was implemented. So what would happen was there was an app. You would apply through the app, and you could use that app to come into the border to apply for asylum, or you could go through that to apply for one of the Biden parole programs. And in about 3 to 6 months, you might have the opportunity to come into the United States. Thousands of people benefited from that. and thousands of people from some of the poorest and most unstable parts of the world.
Yes.
Places like Haiti, which is seeing a lot of instability, Venezuela, which is going through a lot, Cuba, which has been going through a lot for decades. Trump ended that immediately.
Yeah.
So there
I
are
was
people.
reading about that, yeah.
There are people who are in very, very unfortunate circumstances, seeing this light at the end of the tunnel, did all kinds of things to change their life and prepare to come to the United States, and are now being told, sorry, the door is completely and totally closed.
Wow.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was a dust-up because this president appears to be aligned with a lot of the people in the tech industry.
Okay.
People like Zuckerberg at Meta, Elon Musk, the people at Google. And those people take advantage of a visa called the H-1B visa.
Yes.
And this visa has some controversy because there are only 65,000 of those visas. The vast majority of the people who benefit from those visas are the tech companies and many people from places like India and Taiwan and China.
Okay.
But the thing is, those visas run out fast. And because there's a pipeline of those visas, in another part of the economy, there are people that are saying these visas aren't really benefiting Americans. They're not creating the opportunity for American people to get into this industry. One discussion was, well, wait a minute. Why do we need to go to India to recruit people through these visas? If this is such a need and this is such a burgeoning industry, why not maybe create programs in schools like HBCUs and recruit Americans into the program? The reason why I share that is because sometimes people see immigration and they'll see there's one side that's pro and another side that's against. But immigration has implications throughout our society, and different people are reacting to it in different ways. And what we've all wanted, I think, is to find a solution that works for everyone and to have a reasoned discussion on getting to that. And what happened in the past few years was there was an effort that some view as sort of a caring approach, not a problem-solving approach, but the kind of idea that we just want to help. And there was an element of society that thought that that was exploitative of the Americans.
Okay.
But now there's a sense of almost cruelty being the point, where the policies that are coming forth are coming so quick and so harsh that those people who are taking advantage of the opportunity are going to be hit very, very hard. Now, from one seat, the perspectives might be, well, the people that were taking advantage of our open borders aren't going to be able to do that anymore, so it's their just desserts. But it's hard to say that to someone who traveled across 3 or 4 countries escaping political instability with a young child and view them as being exploitative. Now, where we are at this point is we're going to see a lot of litigation to challenge a lot of these changes, but we're going to see some programs that are going to be implemented, and we're going to have to prepare for that new reality.
Okay.
And one of those programs that's definitely going to be the case is going to be the end of the parole programs. It's going to be the end of the asylum process as we know it. And there are going to be far more stringent requirements. So the rumor mill that exists in many immigrant communities is going to become something that we have to deal with, and we have to deal with very critically. Because one of the things that this president did, but that Trump did in the last administration, was he was far more stringent with the applications. So you'd apply for a spouse, and you would miss a sentence, and he would reject the application for that, right? They wanted the T's crossed and the I's dotted. The fees have gone up. The fees will probably go up again. So it's going to be very, very important as we navigate through this to have as much information as possible and to go to sources that are going to give good information, because we don't want people to lose, the potential benefits that they have.
Now, the H-1B1, that H-1 visa, is that connected to EB-5?
Well, the EB-5 visa is an investor visa, right?
Right.
So, it's often the case that those that have get more, and those that don't get less. The investor visa may go up in the cost, but this is a visa where people are investing upwards of $1 million So folks that are in that position are going to have more issues to navigate, but for them it'll be like a change to the tax code. And
Probably,
high
yeah.
net worth individuals have attorneys and accountants that understand that every couple of years there have to be some changes, but their lives aren't going to change that much, right? The H-1B folks are going to have a different experience.
That's the tourist. So the H1
The
the
H-1B
H1 is
visa.
not connected then to EB5.
The
Okay.
H-1B visa is essentially the engineer visa. And
Okay.
let's try to expand on what that means. You get a college degree from a country, and you have a college degree in an area where there's need.
Yes.
Right? This is not the visa for the CEO. This is not the visa for the star athlete. This is the visa for the college graduate in a field that's looking for people.
Niche.
Yes.
A niche market.
A fairly niche market, right?
Fair, yeah.
The last few years, it's been designated for people in the computer, the tech, the engineering industry. These are mid-market individuals. We're talking about a salary range that is, $80,000 to $120,000. These are people that are entering their profession. Now, the Americans that are graduating from college feel that so many of these people have come in, they've dampened the market because the wages that could be gotten if there weren't as many H-1B visas might go higher. And then think about the H-1B visa is when you get a job with an H-1B visa, you have to stay with that company unless you go through a particular process to transfer your visa.
Yeah.
So those employees have less bargaining power than the American.
Yes.
Because what will happen is you're here on a visa, you're 24, you're 25 years old, maybe you have a spouse, maybe you have a young child. The last thing you want to do is lose the visa and be forced to go back to your native country, or lose the visa and not be able to complete the process, because those who have the H-1B visa can often apply to become permanent residents after a certain period of time. So the bargaining power is uneven. So there was discussion, and I wanted to make sure I got back to that, so thank you for bringing that up. So part of the discussion about the H-1B visa was there were some in the community around President Trump, like Elon Musk, who are very, very supportive of the H-1B visa, and there are others in the political space of the president that are very, very opposed. There are those that are truly, truly considered to be America first, and there are those who are about economic development and figuring out the best way to be economically efficient.
Yeah.
Hence the immigration discussion, right? So part of our hope is that we can get to a point where we begin to have the discussion again, which is what we've all wanted since that panic in September 11th. But I fear that we're going to be at least a few months away from that.
Okay.
And what I'm really worried about is what happens from now to that point where things calm down and we can begin a reasonable discussion. I don't want people to miss what else is coming down the road.
Gotcha. So, birthers, immigration, dreamers.
Well, the DREAM Act.
And let me say this, because I bring that up because we know that this administration, particularly this president, has talked about, or there's been rumblings about doing away with DOE, right, the Department of Education. And so, it's be really interesting to know the connection, right, to get the connection. So if he's looking to do away with Department of Education, and then you've got immigrants here that are looking to continue to fulfill their dream of getting educated, but there are policies that are kind of damning that, what's next?
Well, this president's plan appears to be to go in, turn everything upside down, find out, does it still work with the things that broke, with being broken? Did it make sense? And then moving on to the next thing. I believe that many of these ideas are going to play themselves out, and we're going to begin to come to certain understandings. I mean, if we look at something as simple as TikTok, the president wanted to get rid of TikTok until the president began to see that TikTok helped him to a great extent, and the president began to see that TikTok has a very significant impact in the community, in the nation.
Sure.
It is literally no small thing to come to the realization that the president's 18-year-old son had an impact on this particular election that's probably going to be in the history books. Because a lot of the president's appearances in social media were on the advice of his 18-year-old son. And part of that was because his son understood how significant TikTok was. Now, how does this relate to immigration? When you think about something like the DREAM Act, or the H-1B visas, or the investor visas, or the migrant workers, once the president achieves his goal and sees the impact of his goal, it may force reconsideration. You know, when you think about the DREAM Act, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who have been in this country since they were, some of them, toddlers. And one of the questions is going to be, well, what is it that you intend to do with them? And what do you intend to do with communities that empty out of their youth? So I imagine that there's going to be a slew of executive orders with regard to the DREAM Act, because some of the aspects of the DREAM Act have been codified into law. The DREAM Act is kind of like a thing where a number of things have happened that have allowed the people to stay for a prolonged period of time, but that final moment of authorization to get them to be regularized, to be given permanent resident status, that hasn't taken place yet. So it's like they're at the door, and all we need to do is bring them to the other side, and bringing those people to the other side is probably going to be more productive than forcing them back the other way. But the dramatic actions that the president is taking now, and from the immigrant advocacy perspective, sometimes you have to have a dramatic moment to have a breakthrough, may result in that. But whether it's the DREAM Act, whether it's the changes to visas, so sometimes people hear H-1B and B, well, many tourists have something called a B1, B2 visa. That's the tourist visa. Right?
That's,
in the past, that visa was either limited to the more upper income individuals of certain countries, right? Because you had to get an appointment to get to the embassy to get the visa, right? You had to show you had certain, you had the capacity and the intention to return. So it wasn't necessarily an easy thing to get that visa. But then sometimes there'd be some countries or some policies that they'd be a little bit more open. We're now beginning to see a situation where there are certain countries that are being allowed to move away from the tourist visa completely. So there's a country called Romania where they got something called a visa waiver, like many countries in Europe. As you know, most Americans don't have to have a visa to go to most countries in Europe. England is just asking us to have a visa now. I think it started this month. But now there are other countries that the Americans are being reciprocal to, saying, well, we don't need visas from a place like Romania. So now you're going to have a situation where you have a tier of countries where they can travel freely. Then you're going to have another tier of countries that are going to have to work even harder to get visas. So it's almost going to be a sign of wealth that, oh, you're from this country and you have a tourist visa, then that may suggest that you're in a different economic position. And these kind of little tweaks and changes they're gonna have surprising effects on how on how we move forward.
Small businesses.
Well,
I'm just kind of throwing I'm just kind of throwing it out there, and we'll just see how
Well, one of the things that's going to be very, very interesting is how small businesses react and how they react politically to these changes, because many of the small businesses were founded by these immigrants, these undocumented people, because some of them didn't have the ability to get a work permit, so they had to create their own. And then there's these little businesses that created supported communities. Now, when all of these businesses close down, who's going to move into that space? Some small businesses have been struggling with staffing, and many business people have been changed in their political views on immigration based upon their experience, their direct experience with immigrants. It's one thing to see the news and to see these horrible, sensationalist stories of an immigrant assaulting someone, or to drive by a neighborhood that you may have grown up in 30 years ago to see it change and feel a certain way about it. It's another thing to open up a small business and to look for young people to work for you, and find that the people that end up working for you and do a good job for you tend to be newly arrived immigrants. There are businesses that rely on that work. They rely on those people, and those people are gonna have to advocate strongly, because they're going to say, well, wait a minute. You can do all you want with the tax cuts, but if I don't have staff, tax cuts aren't going to help me because I'm not going to generate any money. How do I get the staffing that I need if you're not allowing it?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I imagine that in the coming months, we're going to see some interesting shifts in the posture of certain small businesses.
Okay. A shift in the posture of some of certain small businesses, and particularly because of immigration policies.
Yes.
And how those policies impact business,
Yes.
small businesses in
Yes.
particular.
Yes.
Wow, interesting. And so I've gotten more than I bargained for, as I knew we would.
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe. And so our listeners and our viewers, if there is one or two things that you'd like to say to someone, right, immigrant or not, right, those of us that are here, Americans, live here in America, under this new administration, is there anything in particular that you think we should look out for? One of the key things that stands out to me is refugee, the parole, TPS, those policies, which will go away. And it means that people that live in hostile countries or poor countries or countries where there's uprising won't be able to come here to the United States. Well, that accomplishes the mission of our president. However, what it does for, I guess, those countries, right? Like the impacts to those countries in terms of how they will probably never get better, or the ability to bring about peace or calmness just gets further and further away when you take away those kinds of programs.
There's an individual who said that United States, America, was the last great hope for mankind. And I carry those words with me, and I think of this. There is not an American who doesn't have someone in their background who didn't speak the way that you speak today.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're an Englishman, your ancestors didn't sound American.
Mm-hmm.
We are American because we are immigrants.
All
of us.
Wow.
And if we start from that as our conversation,
Yeah.
finding a solution to this that will work, that's not going to be a pendulum shift to, oh my God, they're being so cruel to all of these poor, innocent children, or why are all of these people who refuse to speak English here causing all this ruckus? If our first principle is recognizing that we were all those people at some point in the history of this country, whether we were those people and we were called pilgrims, or we were those people and we were called Scotch-Irish or Mexican or Haitian or Russian, all of those people have become who we are today. And on balance, it's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
We are the last best hope for mankind.
Wow.
We are the place that everyone still wants to come.
Yeah.
And will still
yeah.
come.
Yeah.
Because of this reason.
Yeah.
And if we forget that, we might not be that.
Yeah.
But if we remember it, I think that it'll temper how we respond to what's going to come. And hopefully it'll create a space for solutions that are going to get us to the next stage of this.
Mm. Any thoughts on China?
Well, in what sense?
Business.
Well, the Chinese have the manpower, they have the wealth, they have the determination, but
They also
don't
have a very contentious relationship with this particular president, right, stemming from his first go-round. And so while all that you say there is true, I think we probably want to get real about what potentially lies ahead as it relates to China, because I think his attitude has not shifted much in terms of not so much being, I guess, in terms of being antagonistic, towards China.
I think that there is the potential for conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a president that is contentious.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that cruelty, the cruelty being the point when it comes to immigration, we also have a president that is almost completely focused on making deals and taking advantage. I don't know that, and I hope that I'm not wrong, that this is a military expansionist president. President Trump is talking about taking Greenland and Panama, but he's not talking about the Taiwan Straits. He's not talking about engaging Russia in the Ukraine. He doesn't seem to be prepared to put us in a place where, the outcome isn't guaranteed.
Okay.
Militarily.
Okay.
I think that this president is angling in any way he can to try to win the competition with China. 30 years ago, the saber rattling that you hear from the president, he used essentially the same words against Japan because he was saying that Japan was taking advantage of us. But when we're talking about China, outside of the military space, we're talking about a country that owns $2 trillion of our debt. We're talking about a country where if they considered that debt was not valueless, our economy would collapse.
Yeah.
And then we'd be in dire straits.
Yeah.
But I want to bring China back to my earlier point about immigration. China's aggressive, they've got money, they've got the determination, but they can't possibly have the innovation that we have because they don't have the people.
They don't have the people, 1 billion plus, and so when you say they don't have the people, not necessarily the numbers, but the talent in terms
diversity.
of
they don't have the diversity.
Okay.
They don't have. They had the TikTok platform, but the TikTok platform is worth all the money because of what the kids are doing.
And Alibaba, they got the Alibaba platform and some of the other high profile.
They can have all that they want.
Yeah.
But it's the people.
Yeah.
It's the innovation. It's what the mix of all of these people that come to this country create.
Sure.
That's what's making us win. And we can't forget that. When you look even at all the tech people, you see Indians, you see all kinds of other immigrants. But then when you look at the creativity, you see African Americans, you see Latinos, you see other people of color, you see people of different genders, bringing all of this to make the value.
Yeah.
And we cannot forget that. And as long as we keep that in mind, I think that we will get through this, and hopefully on the other side we'll get to policy that makes sense.
You've outdone yourself, as I knew you would. Wow. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is just what the doctor ordered. I know I talked to you. I called you and I said, hey, I'd love to have you come and talk about immigration under this new administration. And I certainly believe that if you're listening or viewing this segment of our podcast, wherever the audience is, there's just no way you can't walk away informed in the least, right? You've touched on very important topics. It's just a matter of wait and see, kind of, what you've said, just pointed out what's there and what has been done. And it's really just a matter of the temperament of this administration in terms of what, will be the outcome. I think some of the issues, we probably know the outcome, right?
Yes.
And as you've said a couple of times sitting here, just be prepared, right? There's some things we just need to be prepared for. Awesome, Ralph Kenol. Thank you so very much.
Thank you again for having me.
Listen, this is just two of, right? You've come once, you've come now a second time. This is just two of. I'm sure we're going to bring you back as things begin to unfold because we'd like for you to make sure that we understand it, right? Like you to just kind of unpack what's happening, right? If there's a particular act or action, just kind of unpack it.
I look forward to that. I look forward to coming back in a few months and saying, let's see where we were.
Let's see
where we are.
Let's see where we are versus where we were. And so with that, again, we thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for thinking enough of us to sharing with us on this evening. Again, Ralph Kenol, immigration and business attorney. Ralph is located in Hollywood, Florida, for those that may be interested. And certainly you're always free to reach out to AU Studios if you'd like to learn more about Ralph and about this segment. I am Dr. Miya Burt-Stewart. Again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you soon.